Welcome to this episode of Midlife Men with me, Philip Briscoe. Today I'm joined by Johnnie Lowery. Welcome, Johnnie. I don't think you quite fit the midlife men bit just yet, but I know that you're very interested to talk to about football and how that helps all sorts of people, not least middle-aged men. So you are a massive football fan, and you're going to tell us about that. But you're also going to tell us about how you've had your own mental health challenges and, how you've looked at football to help manage those challenges. And you're also a writer. You've just published your second book called Match Fit, which is an exploration of mental health and in football and really trying to break down the stigma of discussion about mental health. So, Johnnie, welcome. Perhaps you want to start off by just telling your story. Where does your story begin?
Sure. So I'll start with the book that you mentioned there, Match Fit. Like you say, came out Monday just gone. So it's available on Amazon, Waterstones, all major retailers, really. It came from my own experiences from mental health. So I'm 24 years old now. Going back 10 years, when I was in my teenage years, I struggled with my mental health. Felt down a lot of the time, had days where I just didn't want to get up, missed days of school through just feeling like I couldn't get out of bed. Often I'd be crying myself to sleep on a Sunday night and literally trying to stay awake, because the longer I stayed awake, it felt like the longer it would be until I had to go back into school on the Monday morning. But the thing was, I never recognised that I had problems with my mental health at that age, because I didn't know what mental health was. I just thought it was kind of normal, struggling to adjust to life in secondary school, having moved from primary school a few years before, and that just went on and on and on throughout my life in secondary school, really. Went to university in 2017. It's a very different environment to secondary school. It's you see the wider world, I think, a little bit at university. And it was there that I realised that actually it wasn't normal to feel down a lot of the time. I'd kind of lived half a life a bit up until that point, and it kind of hit me there. And realised that I needed help, went and got help. Fast forward to now, or to more specifically to lockdown 3 years ago, and didn't have a lot else to do. And I thought, well, I can write a book here. I can write about football and mental health, because when I was in the kind of the depths of my struggles, I wouldn't have read a book about mental health, because I didn't understand what it was. And if you don't understand what something is, I don't think you often go out of your way to do so. So I was very much stuck in the kind of ignorance, if you like, of what mental health was. I've always been obsessed with football. Like you say, Philip, it's always been a massive part of my life. And I read lots of books about football, still do. So my thinking was, if I write a book about football and mental health, combine the topics, I can bring people in with the football. And I've made sure that the football content in there is interesting, hopefully enough in itself, that it will attract readers and keep them with the mental health. So I can hopefully educate people and about themselves, really, help people to learn about themselves and understand that we all have mental health, be it good, bad. We all have bad days. Even the happiest person in the world will have the odd off day. And we can all use a bit of help sometimes, and hopefully Match Fit just helps normalise that conversation around mental health and makes everyone more confident in putting their hand up, asking for help, whether that be professional help or just to chat with a mate down the pub. Certainly, it would have helped me when I was that age, and seeing as that it wasn't around, that type of book, when I was 14, 15, 16. Hopefully that it helps people now, not only in their teenage years, but I think middle-aged men are perhaps my main target audience, because mental health, when people of that age group were growing up, wasn't spoken about at all. It's only really the last 5 to 10 years, if that mental health has become a topic of conversation. So there's certainly a lot of scope for helping people learn more about it, and hopefully Match Fit achieves that.
And looking at your own challenges when you were younger. Were there any particular triggers, or was there a point where you thought, I need to do something about this? Was it writing the book, or what led you to that?
Yeah, so like I say, when I went to university, I became aware that maybe there was something not quite right. Like you interact at secondary school. I interacted with maybe 5 to 10 people properly on a regular basis, like my close friends. At university, you're suddenly thrown into a different environment where you're meeting hundreds of people on your course, hundreds of people in your halls, hundreds of people on nights out, and you get to see a wider view of the world, really. And I realised that it wasn't just normal to be down a lot of the time. Like, most of the people I knew were out every night of the week, Freshers Week. Everyone's out meeting new people, and I was kind of sat in the corner a bit reserved. And maybe halfway through that first year of uni, it's hard to describe, a kind of a low point. I'd been drinking, is just often the common denominator, I think, and my bad days. And I had a low point where I thought, right, this is it. I need to change something. Like, I can't keep doing this. I've been living a reserved life. I've been kind of locking myself away a little bit and feeling down and just not feeling my best, really, just not at my full potential for 6-7 years of my life. And I just thought, right, like, this can't go on forever. I'm going to need to do something at some point. And went out and got counselling the summer after my first year of university. And I say I'm not perfect now. I still have bad days, but I know my triggers a little bit more now. I know if I'm starting to spiral, how to get out of it. And writing is a big thing for me. Actually, Match Fit is my second book. So I wrote my first book. It's called 6 Added Minutes. It's about my experiences watching Sutton United, my local team. And I actually wrote that whilst I was 19, in the summer after my first year of university, because I needed something to fill the time. I don't do nothing very well. I don't relax very well. My mind will start to play tricks on me if I do that. So I just tried to occupy myself through writing. I wrote the book, never meant to get it published initially, and so I might as well give it a go. And yeah, that came out in 2019. So I know that things that I can do to help benefit my mental health now, with writing being one of those.
And for those people that aren't avid Sutton United fans, tell us a bit about the context of 6 Added Minutes.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to talk about that. Best times of my life in that cut run. Football is a massive passion of mine. It's always been an escape for me. So throughout all of these dark days that I was having, I speak about, I always knew I've got football at the weekend, and then it's like 2 different lives. It really was like 2 different lives. My Saturday life, and then my Sunday to Friday life. And I always knew on a Saturday, everything else goes out the window. My mind is just on football. I don't think of anything else. I'm there with my mates at the football. And just supporting Sutton, hoping for the best with Sutton. And we've had an incredible time. I got my first season ticket for the 2011-2012 season. So this is just after I started secondary school. And since then, we've gone up a couple of divisions. And the book, 6 Added Minutes, it talks specifically about the FA Cup. So we had a few decent runs early on in my time watching Sutton, but never really hit the big time. Then all of a sudden in 2017, we ended up in the FA Cup last 16, and we played against Arsenal, which was unbelievable. Really, I still can't get my head around it. And I just wrote about that. My mates had told me, you should put pen to paper and just write about your experiences, just because we all want to read it. Like, it was such an incredible thing we went through. And it was a good enough story that it actually got published. I still, to this day, I don't think it's written amazingly. A 19-year-old me was not as good a writer as I am now. But it's just the story that it told is so uplifting, really.
And did it help writing? I interviewed a chap called Tom, and he found writing about his experiences when he was a child really helped him overcome, the trauma and the stress of that, of what he'd experienced. Did you find that monitoring was natural? Did it come naturally to you?
Yeah, it's kind of cathartic. I think it's like almost like diary writing. You're putting your thoughts out onto a page. And 600 Minutes, my first book, it really was just. I didn't really research it. It was just the thoughts inside my head, the memories on the cup run. I did it in one summer. A few weeks over one summer, 50,000 words, just that quickly, that easily. And it really did. It similar to actually being at the matches itself. It just took my mind off things. It was a few hours a day doing a bit of research, a bit of writing. And it's time when my mind can't be thinking negative thoughts. It can't be going down the path of you're not good enough. Yeah, you're not doing enough of this, enough of that. So it was a big help for me. And I think again with MatchFit, I started MatchFit over 3 years ago. So that's been a very long term project, very different to 600 Minutes. And it always, if I did find I had a bit too much time on my hands, just go into doing a bit of research for the book, a bit of writing. And I had a project to work on, so I had an end goal and motivation through the days. So it has been a big help for me writing, and it's something that I certainly plan on continuing. And I've got already plans for books to come out in the next couple of years, so keep an eye out for that.
And just before we talk more about your new book, I just wanted to go back to something you said earlier about the fact that you had counselling. Just for the benefit of people listening who might relate to what you're saying, how did you find a counsellor? How did you go about that?
So I was very lucky. So my dad was working for a company where the health insurance he had covered family members under the age of 22 or 21 or whatever, but it covered me, being 19 at the time. So I was quite lucky, I have to admit, to escape the long waiting times that we all hear about in the news and causing me a lot of trouble. But I pretty much went straight into it through Bupa, which is very helpful. And I have a similar thing with where I work now. So I'm actually starting a second course of counselling in a couple of weeks now, actually, which is related to the fact that it's anxiety-based, social anxiety-based specifically. I actually gave up drinking in January, which maybe we can talk a little bit more about later. So it's something I've been able to find through Bupa, which and I know not everyone has the privilege to access. So I'm very grateful for that.
I guess there are other routes to counselling, but you found, did you, that it really helped?
Yeah, and it wasn't an extended thing really. It was a couple of months over the summer, maybe. I can't remember exactly, but maybe 10 sessions. It just helped me understand a little bit about the way my brain works, and to understand myself really. And what I learned from that, the techniques, the self-awareness more than anything, I can still apply now. So it was very helpful without taking up a lot of time, without taking over my life, and without really costing me anything as well because of the insurance. So it all worked out very well for me in the end.
And you mentioned that you'd stopped drinking alcohol at the beginning of this year. Have you seen, a difference? Has that helped?
Yeah, massively. Absolutely life-changing. I mean, that with my drinking, the reason I gave it up is because when I had my first drink, on any time I'd start drinking, I then wouldn't stop. I'd lose the ability I just lose control, completely lose control. As soon as I had one pint, I would always be the person who's staying for another pint, who's staying for another pint. Now, we play football on a Wednesday, me and a few mates, and we'd go to the pub on a Wednesday, and that everyone being sensible have 1 or 2 pints on a Wednesday night and go home, and you've got work on Thursday. Like, come on, you're not going to do anything stupid. Not me. I would be there. Who's having another drink? Who's having another drink? My friends would all go home, and maybe I'd meet someone else at the bar, and I'd be, are you having another drink? You having another drink? And I'd be there until closing time on a Wednesday night. And it just things like that. And it got to the point where I just thought, I just can't go on. Like, I can't, I'm just so out of control when I drink, and I don't like to be out of control, certainly not on a regular basis. So I gave it up in January. A lot of my lowest points in terms of depression would come in the week after I had a heavy drinking session. The first few days directly related to the fears, the anxieties you get when you wake up and you can't remember the whole night, which was happening a lot for me, to be honest. And then the rest of it, I just had a kind of continued low mood. So I don't think I could have gone on like that, to be honest, and it certainly wasn't getting any better. So I feel a lot more, in control of myself. I feel a lot more positive now. And yeah, it has been certainly the last 8 months of my life have been far happier than the 8 months prior to that.
Well, that's great to hear. Well done. So just let's move to the book Match Fit. I know you explore lots of different themes related to mental health and football in the book. Perhaps we could talk a bit more about that. I mean, to start with, I know you mentioned earlier that, your Sunday to Friday was pretty miserable, but then your Saturday was completely different. And I wonder how, looking at in terms of the sense of community at football matches and, having that the fact that you're all supporting the same team, how that obviously had an effect on you, but perhaps you could talk a bit more about that.
Yeah, I think football, like you say, it's a great community. I spoke to someone who's a Bournemouth fan. He's part of a group called Talking Cherries, which is a mental health support group specific to AFC Bournemouth, because everyone's got that that common link. You all support the same team. And he was actually saying football is a tribal sport, and a lot of the time the media will say tribalism is painted as a bad thing. You see all the negatives in the media, and there are negatives to tribalism, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that it's perfect, it's not at all, but tribalism, what it does do is it bonds people together, because you're all behind the same cause. You've all got those common traits, the links to each other, and so you'll always be inclined to support your own. And I think with Sutton, they're some of the first people that I really spoke to about my mental health issues and just had support straight away. It's just the done thing to support people that through football, I think. And I've always been able to rely on that community. It's been very important for me. And the fact that football it's regular, it's every week. At the end of each week, I know I'm going to be meeting up with these people pretty much every weekend, home and away. It's great to have that support network just there. It's not even like you have to make much effort, because it's just you don't have to organise anything. You just know you're going to be going into Sutton. You're going to meet in the pub at midday on a home game. You're going to meet. You just send the train times to the group chat for the away game, and you meet at Euston at whatever ridiculous time in the morning to get a train to Barrow or wherever it may be. So it's great to have that support network, and I think especially when I was younger, it's that sense of hope at the end of a tough week that things will get better. You do have the weekend, and that was vital for me to get through the toughest times that I had.
And you've included some kind of academic research of you in the book as to how or why people get so dedicated to football.
Yeah, there was one of my interviewees, Dr. Alan Pringle. He actually did his PhD on why people are football supporters, which I found fascinating. Because I've always thought if someone asks me why I'm such a big football fan, it's logically a very hard question to answer. I mean, why do I get up at 4:00 in the morning on a Saturday to go travel 300 miles to watch us play at a place where we've never won a game? Barrow in Furness, and I've been there 8 times now. We've lost 6 and drawn 2. Fantastic. Like, what a thing to do. The hours I've spent traveling there and back. But he actually puts it very well. The sense of community is one. The sense of hope that I talk about is one. I think those are the main two, to be honest. And he actually, he's really looked into the detail on this, interviewed a lot of people, and found that they're both recurring themes. There's other things as well. I think sense of catharsis he picked out in his research. So if you've had a crap week, you can just go and you shout at the opposition players, you shout at the ref, you shout at the opposition fans, you sing a few songs, have a few beers, if you're that way inclined, and then it's you just feel like you've got everything off your chest a bit. And then you go back into work on Monday morning feeling a little bit more refreshed. So things like that, I think, it is interesting to see that academic view of why people are football supporters. It's like reading an analysis someone's done of your own brain. This guy, Adam Pringle, he wrote his PhD paper in 2005, I think. So, long before when I was regular at the football, but he could have been writing it about me. And it is fascinating to have that insight. And it'll be the same for so many other football fans like myself as well.
And I guess that leads on to actually playing, the kind of grassroots level, and how that can benefit your mental health. So I know you've looked at that in your book as well. Perhaps you could explain a bit more.
Yeah, so I think there's maybe two sides to that in the book. So there's the general benefits that everyone will get through being involved in sport. So release of endorphins with football or any team sport, really. The social side of it, the community side of it, getting to meet people. One of my flatmates that I live with now I actually met through playing football. So that it just goes to show that these social links, they're there to be made through playing sport. MatchFit looked at a couple of very specific cases where football's gone above and beyond, really, to help certain groups. So Grenfell Athletic were one of the three teams that chapter looked at. And as you probably guessed from the name, they're a team set up in the wake of the Grenfell fire, really to help survivors, but also members of the community. Try and pick my words here, but to kind of cope with the PTSD, the trauma, to deal with it as best as they could. And try and help themselves as much as they could, really. So there's players in that team that were in the tower the night of the fire, players that saw it, players that lost friends, family. And football, it binds them all together, and they've got that shared experience. So they can support each other. They know that all of their teammates, they're all going through the same thing. They've all had to go through this great trauma, and they've all got each other's shoulders to cry on, basically. But it gives them purpose as well. Probably in a similar way to going to the football at the weekend did for me. They've always got that out at the weekend, that chance to maybe escape for a few hours and to try and work towards the greater goal. I mean, when they were set up, they're in something like Division 4 of the Middlesex County Sunday League. And when I went to watch them play, they were, if they'd won the game, they'd have actually won the top division. Unfortunately, ended up in second place that season. So they're not quite there, but the progress is incredible. So that was a really heartwarming story from a heartbreaking background, really. Then another one I looked at were a team called Better FC, actually linked to a charity of the same name. It's a charity that I'm partnered with. So 15% of the profits from the book are going to the charity Better. They're named after a person, Better Merjan, who sadly took his own life a few years ago. The charity was set up by his family to softly raise awareness of mental health. This is how the charity themselves put it. So the football team is just one arm of what they do, and I'd recommend taking a look at them. They're London/Surrey based. If you just search Better, BEDER, into Google, they do a lot of really good stuff. I covered the football side of things. So they have a football team. Their last game they played, I think they actually had 5 ex-Premier League players. So they've got the big names in there. But also, if anyone wants to play for the team, you put your name forward, you pay whatever it is, £10, £20, and you're in this mental health safe space. So not only are you getting to play football alongside Wayne Routledge, Matthew Briggs, Chris Eagles, etc., but you know that, again, that it's a safe space. If you want to talk about your own mental health, you can do. If you need a shoulder to cry on, it's there. I think that's a great thing for the people involved in the team, for the people that are playing, also for the wider mental health landscape, because having those celebrities in there, it is great for raising awareness. And like I say, they're doing a really excellent job.
And I guess from a physical health perspective, if you're playing, whether you're playing competitive, 11-a-side games weekend or just 5-a-side, walking football, physical health does help support mental health.
Yeah, absolutely. There's some research on this that I've cited in the book, actually, I think somewhere in Wales. And they found out that combining physical interventions with the kind of the typical mental health interventions, so counselling, medication, etc., tends to get better results than just that traditional way of doing things. So that the link between physical and mental health actually comes out in proven research, and it's something that is starting to come more mainstream, I think. And these more almost practical based interventions, if you can call it that. I think that's an area in the future that will be looked into more. There'll be more research on it, become more and more mainstream. And things like, you can get, if you're overweight, you can be given, for example, free gym sessions. This is something Alan Pringle was saying. And why not, if you're struggling with your mental health, you can get free gym sessions, free football sessions. I'm sure it's something that will become common. Perhaps it is already done or not. I just don't know about it. And yeah, I think that's something we can expect to see a lot more of.
Right. And in the book, you look kind of at football as an industry as well. And especially looking at things like the role of football management or the pressures of football management. And I know you've interviewed a few big names for the book. Perhaps you want to talk a bit more about what you've discovered there.
Yeah, so I've got a chapter on professional footballers and then a chapter on managers as well. Really just exploring the unique pressures in each job. So I'll start with the playing side of things. So, it is probably quite common in society for us to think, footballers, they all earn £200,000 a week. They all live the dream. How can they have poor mental health? The first thing I'd say to that is that the vast majority of professional footballers don't earn anywhere near that sort of money. From the Championship down to League Two, they're earning a couple of £1,000s a week, which is good. On the face of it, don't get me wrong, it's certainly more than I earn. But their career will be over by the time they're in their 30s. And then all of a sudden, you don't have any qualifications because you come through an academy system a lot of the time. So you won't have a degree, you won't have any A-levels. You've never really done another job. You've just been a professional footballer your whole life. And then in your mid-30s, you've got to do something completely different. Players sometimes go into punditry after they finish playing or coaching, but not many. Certainly punditry is pretty much exclusively for former top-level Premier League players. Jamie Carragher, Gary Neville. You're not going to get your average League Two player on Monday Night Football on Sky Sports anytime soon. So then you all of a sudden, you've got to go through this challenge of retirement and reinvent yourself, which on a practical level is tough, but on a mental level, I'm sure, I don't remember who said it, but being a sportsman, you die two deaths. Your actual death, and then the death of your character as a footballer. So that's a big challenge for players. But even whilst you're still playing, if I make a mistake at work, I might get a ticking off from my line manager. If someone playing in the Premier League makes a mistake, they've got not only 40,000, 60,000 people shouting down the back of their necks, but social media now as well. So that's a really big challenge for people to deal with. And we all think we'd be able to deal with it if they're getting paid a certain amount, but until you've been in that situation, I don't think you can really appreciate how tough it can be on people. Much the same for managers as well. And even a professional footballer in League Two, you're playing in front of 8,000 people, often carrying the weight of expectation of an entire town on your shoulders. So it's not the same macro level as the Premier League, but there's still a hell of a lot of pressure there.
And what happens then? What happens if you carry that pressure and you're not managing it? I'm assuming there's some support, but I guess you were saying that just because you're a professional footballer, you get paid to play football, doesn't mean you're immune from mental health challenges.
Yeah, there's not to be honest, from what I found, there's really not a lot of support for mental health for professional footballers at all. So I spoke to Marvin Sordell, and he quite famously retired from football by choice. I think age 28, 29, because he was struggling with his mental health. He just wasn't enjoying the industry. And one of the things he said to me was he not once received any support for his mental health. He had no mental health issues. He'd spoken out about his mental health a few years before he retired, and even then didn't receive any support. So you think that the situation is not going to be any better for anyone else. And this was only 5 years ago, not a long time ago at all. Are things changing? Slowly, I think we're getting there. More players are starting to talk about their mental health. We've had, very recently, for example, Dele Alli. And what I found interesting about his interview was we should always be interested in the people behind footballers. We should want to support the mental well-being of footballers anyway, just like we would want to support the mental well-being of anyone in society. Footballers should be no different. But let's look at this from a more cynical lens, from the view of the football clubs, who, even if they're completely disregarding well-being, which in reality happens a lot of the time, you still want your players to be performing, right? How much would Everton have invested in Dele Alli? How much would Tottenham have invested in Dele Alli? Quite a lot. And yet, because they're not prioritising his mental health, he's actually becoming less of an asset for them. He's not playing as well on the pitch. You think football clubs would have more of an incentive to look after the mental health of their players so they can get the best out of them on the pitch. So perhaps it's not an incentive issue, but an education issue for football clubs. They need to be more aware of how important mental health is. A lot of players in the Premier League now, from some of the things I found out, are looking for counselling and mental health support off their own backs from their own money, because it's still not something that's common within a lot of clubs. So I still think that the football industry at the top does need to change a bit. It's becoming less macho, and I'm confident for the future because today's young generation, mental health is a lot more at the forefront. So maybe 20 years time, when these players are becoming managers, it will become more normalised anyway. But certainly I don't think the support is really there at the minute. And it's got a long way to go.
And another issue that you tackle in the book, and one that we have done on this podcast, is that of gambling addiction. And we've talked to James Grimes from Gambling with Lives previously. But I know you explore in a bit more detail why sports people might be a bit more predisposed, or sports fans might be a bit more predisposed to addiction than the general population. And I wonder if you could talk more about that. Yeah,
probably two parts to that answer. So looking at professional sportsmen, and we've seen in football high-profile cases of gambling addiction, the likes of Jerry Barton, Ivan Toney, being banned for gambling offences, and I think perhaps more to follow if you believe what you read in the papers. So professional sportsmen, one theory is that they're naturally quite competitive. So from a young age, they'll have been in an environment which is very competitive, and to excel and succeed in that environment, you have to be very competitive yourselves. Which leads to thoughts of, well, I can beat the bookies. I can win money here. I can be better than everyone else. And how many people make money from gambling? Basically none. But the professional sportsmen are more likely to believe that they will be in the very small percentage that do. So that can mean that sportsmen, sportswomen are more naturally predisposed to gambling addiction. Then I think the environmental side of things, and this is where James Grimes and his work with Gambling with Lives really comes in. Because if you're a football fan and you watch a game or even on Match of the Day, how many times are you seeing gambling adverts? You're inundated. You can't avoid them. It's just every second, everywhere you look, on shirts, in like the pitch side advertising hoardings. You watch the post-match interviews, the managers are stood in front of a backboard covered in gambling sponsors. You cannot get away from it at all. So in being inundated with this advertising, the companies are paying for it for a reason. I know that they've denied that gambling advertising affects behaviour, why are they paying for the advertising then? And logically, that doesn't add up to me at all. So if you're showing all these adverts constantly, I think it is going to affect your behaviour. It's going to encourage you to gamble. And James described it as an exaggerated perception of normality, I think it was, where we've come to think that gambling is part of football. You go to the football on a Saturday at 3:00, you place the bet. It doesn't have to be like that. And I think we do need to change that perception. I'm certainly with James and his campaign 100%. I really want to try and get Sutton signed up with the big step to end all gambling advertising in football. So hopefully we'll make some progress there. So a kind of personal crusade of mine. It's no wonder really that gambling addiction is so common amongst football fans. You think of the environment that we're in. If you are a recovering gambling addict like James is, it must be a real challenge to go down the football, to watch the football when betting is just so ingrained in the culture at the minute. It's not to say that we should ban gambling altogether, but I don't think we should be encouraging it and promoting it on anywhere near the level that we are as a society at the moment.
Great. Okay. Well, that's been really great. And your book's out now, so we'll put links in the description online. I wonder if you could kind of finish with, what somebody listening to this who is football fan, similar to yourself, perhaps recognises that they are suffering with their mental health, perhaps through depression, anxiety, and not really knowing what to do. What advice, based on your experience, would you give them?
Yeah, 100%. I know what my answer is here. It's seeking help and putting your hand up and trying to work on your mental health is not a weakness. I mean, if you compare from my own experiences, an 18-year-old version of myself that had looked for mental health support compared to what I was like, I mean, the difference is night and day. Before I'd looked for help in my mental health, would I have written a book? No chance, really. Would I be sat here on a podcast, being confident and speaking to people that I've never met before? No chance. Like, would I have had the social life that I have now? Absolutely not. Look, in a football context, players that ask for help with their mental health can feel a lot more confident, get it off their chest, play a lot more freely. I think it's really beneficial if you're working on your mindset. And your mental health is a big part of that. You're going to be a much stronger version of yourself than you would be if you just sat away, kept quiet, and accepted your almost kind of a lower level of yourself, if you like. You're not quite at your full potential if you're not putting your hand up and asking for help when you need it. Don't accept being a second best version of yourself. You shouldn't have to settle for being, for not feeling your best. I mean, you should always be, as happy as you can be. And I think it's really important to bear that in mind, that it's a sign of strength, of courage to put your hand up and get support on your mental health. And it all starts with understanding where you are, with knowing about what mental health is. I think that's my takeaway message. Like, take that step, get help where you need it, understand your own triggers, where you can improve your mood, your mental health, and you'll feel much better for it in the long run.
Brilliant. Thank you. Great advice. And you're living testimony to that. Thank you for sharing your story today. Thank you for telling us about the book. And great to have had you on. So thank you, Johnnie.
Cheers. Thank you very much, Philip.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of Midlife Men. Johnnie's 2 books, 6 Added Minutes, which is all about him growing up watching his beloved local team Sutton United, and his latest book, Match Fit, an exploration of mental health in football, can be found at major online retailers including Waterstones and Amazon. The charity that Johnnie mentions is called Better and is focused on reducing suicide, and you can find out more about what they're doing and about Better FC at www.bedder.org.uk. If you have a suggestion for a topic you'd like us to cover in the podcast, or if you have a story you'd like to share, then please contact me either on Twitter @midlifemen or email me at midlifemen01@gmail.com. Join me next time when we talk to other midlife men about their stories, and maybe you'll find that they resonate with you. Thank you.